I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are and to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past and present. I would particularly like to acknowledge Professor Derek and Dr. Akanisi and also Professor Konai. I hope I got your name right, so apologies if I said it wrong. I'm Michael from Newcastle on the coast of Australia, just above Sydney there, and I'm not very good with pictures, but I just grabbed a picture of a boat on the lake just near where I live. So I'm very fortunate to be here spending time by the water, and it's very reminiscent of where I live. I'm very fortunate to live near the water. I would like to particularly again acknowledge and thank all of our people who've made this possible. Particularly I want to acknowledge Derek and Anne Sherrill and their colleagues, and of course Umesh Sharma, who have brought together this group. This has been a very special week for us, and I hope that this symposium is helpful to all of us in sharing that energy. I hope I'm not overstating things, because I know Derek will be summarising what we have to say, but it's interesting to me as a participant that none of the people on this panel shared with each other what they put on these slides. And already I see, and I'm sure Derek can see, some interesting key themes coming through, and yet we didn't plan that. So I'd like to just highlight that, because as Missy spoke, I thought, wow, isn't that interesting that we didn't swap notes, but the same themes are emerging. Okay, I'll be fairly brief. I've got just some dot points, but you can see a theme there across all of my dot points. The key theme there is that first one. It has to be real. It has to be real. There is a tendency in my work, in my university, sometimes to become removed from what is important. And what is important is what is happening for our students, our families, the people that we actually connect with. So right throughout, for me, throughout all of my work with students in classrooms, with teachers, with schools, I always have to come back to the question, is this real? Is it meeting needs? Is it based on that person's experience? Can I get behind what is happening for that person and understand it through their eyes? That is my test, always has been, always will be. I'm really excited about this second point because, as I say, Missy and I didn't swap notes, but Missy said time and time again at the end of her talk, people, people, people. I cannot emphasise enough that second point, that high quality reciprocal interactions between us, they are the key to everything. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that's important to me in a minute. I won't overextend this point, but sharing the same values is something we discovered this week. We share the same values. We work in different countries around the world, in different contexts, but we all believe in the same important values as human beings. Those aspects are vital. And finally, this is a saying, this saying at the bottom there, small steps to success. It's a saying that I use with my trainee teachers. It's a saying that I use with students, or did use when I was privileged to work with students with disabilities in schools. If we see, sometimes you can think of it as, is the glass half full or half empty? We always want to see it as half full, and we want to say every student is learning in their own way and in their own time, but they are learning. A couple of us, I won't name them because it will show how old we are, but a couple of us on this panel remember the days when students with very severe disability, and they're the group that I've worked with and still try to work with, didn't come to school, weren't regarded as people who could learn anything, and were regarded with very disparaging terms in the West. Now we believe and know and we practice, it's not perfect, but as Umesh said, we learn from our errors and we move on. We know that everybody learns. but they learn at their own rate and in their own situation. And that's vital. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, look, the next slide's there already. Okay. Why I think they worked. I think those principles have worked because at the end of the day, we're all people with emotions and beliefs and values. So if we can take people with us and they know that they are known and valued, then education will work. If it is something that is imposed, people are told, you will do this, the natural response is to pull back and say, but why? So I think I want to emphasise the importance of that value base. It's more than values. We need the values as a core. Of course, we need skills and knowledge and strategies. But we've spent quite a bit of time looking at that interaction. The second point I just think is critical. Passion and energy are vital. We need to model for our students, if we are training teachers, we need them to know that we believe in the cause. We believe in the ability of our students. So being passionate, being energetic, knowing what a privilege it is for us to have such a wonderful opportunity to work alongside others and to make a difference is key. And then, of course, again, I'm going to refer to Umesh, again, made that point, this is important. To sustain change practice, there has to be, yes, there has to be my personal commitment, your personal commitment, but we also know, and this is where I won't go into implementation science, but this is why we have to think about wider support, whether it's the ministry, whether it's the university, whether it's the government, more broadly, whether it's our local community, whether it's the school leadership. There has to be contextual support. We can't do it alone. We have to do it together, which comes right back to the point about relationships. Next slide, thank you. I want to share a very personal example. I still get a little bit choked up sharing it, so forgive me if I explain it, even though it happened a long time ago. I was working in a classroom for students. I had 6 students with very severe disability. Some of the students had very high levels of challenging behaviour, and it was tough. It was tough for me as a fairly new teacher to know how best to support them. It was tough to learn about how to engage with those students. I was fairly early in my career. I'm not particularly proud of this story, people, but I'm going to share it because it was a powerful aha moment for me. I was sitting opposite Gaynor. Gaynor was a student, and I just say I've worked with many students with very high levels of aggressive, violent behaviour and challenging behaviour. In all of my experience, I actually enjoy working with students who give me that hard behaviour because I can work with it. The hardest students I've worked with are the students who have internalising challenging behaviour. They just shut down, don't want to engage. Gaynor was such a student. The point I want to make is it took me years to get to know Gaynor, but one particular incident helped me understand that it wasn't about Gaynor, it was about me, understanding her quality of life. So we were sitting there, Gaynor was in her wheelchair, and the other students were doing other things, and the teacher aide was helping them. I presented Gaynor, who had no motor control of her hands, but she had good vision and I believe she had good hearing. I presented her with milk and juice, as I'd done many times before. I said, Gaynor, and I pointed to the 2 items, would you like milk? And I looked at her, or juice? Gaynor looked straight back at me, absolutely without, and this was early when I first was working with Gaynor. I had lots of distractions because I had a particular boy who was extremely difficult, and so I was a little distracted, but no excuse for what happened. Gaynor made no response, and because I was so needing to move fast, I said, okay, let's have milk. And I gave her some milk. helped her to have the milk. But she was quite impassive. And after the interaction, my aide came up to me quietly and said, I think if you just slow down, maybe with respect, Michael, if you just wait, Gaynor may show you something. You can imagine how embarrassed I was, like. So the next day, I presented milk and juice. And I said, Gaynor, and I indicated, would you like milk or juice? And I just waited. And I remember the 20 seconds because for me, it's very hard to stand still, it's very hard to slow down. And after 20 seconds, Gaynor looked at one item, looked at the other item, looked at me, smiled, she'd never done that, and looked back down at the juice. Then she looked at the juice, looked back at me and smiled. Now, the point I want to make here is that that was one of my key moments in my career because I realised that because I had come from a particularly behavioural training approach, and there's nothing wrong with that, it has its place, because I'd come from a highly structured teaching instructional approach, I was missing the quality of that interaction. And Gaynor was teaching me. I was learning from Gaynor. I was reduced to water. And after that, I was able to extend the choices, give her more power in what she could choose, and move the control from me to her. Start to introduce, in Gaynor's case, pictures. She would look at a picture instead of the object, and so on. So now she's able to make more choices, but wait for it, she's connecting with a teacher who is starting to know her reality. Does that make sense? And around the same time, a dear colleague of mine, Tony Shattuck, just said those famous throwaway lines, you wish you could say them yourself. He just said, it's not what you do to people, it's what you do with people. And I thought, I think I'd better learn something here. Anyway, I could go on. It takes time, energy, shared commitment for things to change and stay changed. I think I've already alluded to that. I know I've taken a lot of time. We ended up doing a project which was large scale, about training teachers in how to do exactly what had happened in that moment with Gaynor. How do we create communicative contexts that are student-led? They don't have to be student-directed, but they are interactive. Now, I'm not going to say that everything worked, and I'm not going to say that all the instruction that and the interactions I've had have been perfect. But what I've learnt is that it is vital to know each other. If we just teach the skills and say, here are the skills, good luck with that, we won't get very far. If we get behind the experience of the person and try to understand their totality, that will be much more effective. Okay, last one. Or am I done? I'm done. There you are. Okay, thanks.